right, welcome into Locked On Knicks. I am Alex Wolf, joined as always by Gavin Shaw, joined not as always by our very special guest today. We got CP from the wonderful YouTube channel, KnicksFanTV. He does live post-game after every Knicks game, which is ridiculously impressive and very dedicated. And I cannot believe the amount of effort and work that you put into your product, CP. I admire it very much, and I've even been on it a bunch of times. So what is going on, man? How you doing?
Alex, Gavin, I'm doing well. Let me say this. I thought I was going to get a little reprieve from Knicks basketball, after Summer League and all of that. But football season came and went like a cheap thrill. And so my Giants are just a mess right now.
Hey,
so
it's Danny Jones time. It's Danny Jones time.
The Daniel Jones era has started. And so, it just took the wind out of my sails, man. So it's back to basketball. I'm ready to go. Couple at least still training camp. Let's go.
At least if it makes you feel any better, your quarterback doesn't have mono. So
yet.
That was rough, man. And the media keeps making it a point. Like, damn, like, okay, man.
Jeez.
Yeah. Did you see the graphic Jets put out where it's like him like pointing and it's like out indefinitely, mononucleosis?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sucks. Whatever. That became like a whole punchline. And like the Jets can't help themselves.
It's the butt fumble all over again, man.
I know. It's like the butt fumble, but it's like, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like the make out madness or something. I don't know. You've been kissing too many girls. But anyway, CP, I wanted to just kind of lead off by just kind of talking about how you feel. The general premise of the show is we're going to get into talking about all the free agent additions that the Knicks made and what we think that their best case and worst case for this upcoming year are. But I wanted to just lead off, like, this is your first time on Locked On Knicks. Like I said, I've obviously been on KnicksFanTV, but people here might not be familiar with you, although they should be because your channel is huge and awesome. But I'm just kind of curious, what were some of your thoughts, just on this offseason? How did you feel about it? Did you feel like the sky was falling when things went how they did? Did you just kind of feel cool with it? Were you into how free agency went and everything?
Well, I would say when you're caught in the hype from the lottery to the free agency rumors and then when things actually fall the other way, it's hard not to get wrapped up into it. You know what I mean? So it's hard not to be disappointed when we didn't, listen, we were at the lottery party. The atmosphere was electric. We had ESPN was filming from the party. When we cracked into the top four, I mean, we blew the roof off of the place, and we just knew that we were shooing for Zion. So when we hit third, it was a little bit of a disappointment, but then we got back up with RJ and we went into Summer League. I was there with a couple other Knicks content creators. We got to see RJ up close and personal. He struggled a bit in the beginning, and then he came back to life. You take Summer League with a grain of salt, but it was good to see him pick it up down the stretch. We also saw some positives from Iggy, which was great as well. And then from the free agency standpoint, I would say, listen, obviously when KD got injured, it was just like typical Knicks. Obviously with all the prognosticators predicting that we would have landed on him getting hurt. And then ultimately going to the Nets. Yeah, it was a little shock. It was a little upsetting, but I think at the same time, when you look at what the management did, going for their plan B, not necessarily overspending on, as they would consider, second tier free agents and netting some of these veteran guys to more flexible contracts, I think we ended up having a decent offseason.
And I think that's the crucial point, that none of these guys outside of Julius Randle and even him not to a great degree are permanent or even really guaranteed to be back here next season. And I guess because of that, we can sort of take this entire podcast with a grain of salt, and we're just going to sort of go over the list and go over the best and worst case scenario for all the players the Knicks signed. But you can always say, the worst case scenario is really you get rid of him after a year. So that's sort of the brilliance of what the Knicks did in rebounding for missing out on KD and Kyrie. But I guess without further ado, let's start off with Taj Gibson, CP. What did you think about that signing in particular? And I guess what do you think his ceiling is, and what do you think his floor is as a Knick?
I like the Taj Gibson signing. He brings a much needed veteran presence, kind of like what DeAndre brought last season, kind of being the coach's eyes and ears out there on the court, getting the young guys together. I think he can help tremendously with Mitch. Help Mitch continue to be more disciplined in his reads and especially off ball on the defensive end. He's going to bring that rebounding to the fold and kind of just be that adult in the locker room. Obviously, from a price standpoint, yeah, the contract was a little pricey, but being flexible with the 1 year option, I didn't mind Taj as that acquisition.
So what would you say, what do you think is the best case scenario for him this year? And what do you think is the worst case scenario for him?
I think best case is him in a backup role, providing that spark for the second unit on the boards, on the defensive end, on the glass, manning the paint and giving us maybe say 12 to 15 minutes a night. I think that would be ideal for Taj. Worst case scenario, I think, is if he's the starting center. I mean, that points to Mitch's durability, right? Which I think is still something that we're not too clear on. I mean, Mitch was kind of banged up at certain points last year with his frame. I'm just not sure. You just don't know how he's going to hold up over 82 games. You know what I mean? Especially the way that he plays. So Taj being he's a power forward. You know what I mean? So if you're considering him for major minutes at the 5, then I think we're in trouble going forward over the course of a season.
Yeah, he's had such an interesting career, like a guy who came out of USC and he was already I think 24, 25 years old and then was such a good fit on those Bulls teams. And it somehow, even though he's sort of anachronistic in how he plays, like you mentioned, he really is sort of a power forward, but doesn't shoot a whole lot of threes,
right?
Kind of a banger, kind of a mid-range guy. I'm interested to see. I think you hit the nail on the head. To me, the downside with him is him playing too significant of a role because I think the Knicks are clearly overpaying him, but as long as it's only for 1 year, that doesn't necessarily matter all that much. I guess it just, if Mitch consistently gets in foul trouble, this was something we talked about, Tom Piccolo. If Mitch just can't physically hold up to bigger minutes, that kind of concerns me. Alex, I'm interested because I don't think we ever really went deep on Taj. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking kind of along the same lines of what you guys said. I would almost go one step further from what CP said and say that barring any injuries, I don't want Taj to really be getting much of any minutes, which seems kind of wild for a guy that you're paying $10 million for the year. But I think that he's realistically, the Knicks probably look at him as an insurance policy. Right. Gavin, you kind of alluded, he has an interesting career arc. He actually, if you look at his numbers, and it's the same, we'll get to him in a second, but Wayne Ellington, you can make the same parallel to almost, that these guys are sort of peaked strangely in their 30s. They're both in their 30s now, and they're putting up some of their best numbers the last couple of years. But I would preferably, considering you spent all the money you did on Julius Randle, Marcus Morris, and Bobby Portis, plus you already have Mitchell Robinson there, I don't really want Gibson playing.
Yeah. I guess it depends on the matchups, right? But if it's not Taj getting the bulk of the minutes as a backup 5, you're asking a lot from either a Portis or maybe a Randall and a small ball 5, even a Morris, to kind of be that rim protector. I don't know that any of them are a rim protector. That's my biggest. Taj definitely isn't. Exactly.
Taj can at least hold his own. He could put an arm in a guy's back and stop him from backing him down.
Right.
I think Julius can do that too, in certain situations, but he lacks the length to really compete against the biggest centers in the league.
Yeah.
Portis just kind of, from what I understand, kind of sucks on defense. So he's got the right size, but he just doesn't have the right tools. So we actually just talked about on the Mitch season review and preview from last year that he's really the only guy on the team that you consider a rim protector. So if he's not out there, I feel like the Knicks are going to almost be kind of forced to go small. I think an ideal lineup, if you have Mitch out of there, is going to be something like Julius Randle, and then get a guy like Marcus Morris in there at the power forward, and then fill out the rest of it from there, and just kind of try to run guys off the floor, because you're not gonna scare them defensively with pretty much anybody but Mitch out there at center, I don't think.
I kind of want to do actually just both of them together, Wayne Ellington and Reggie Bullock, because I feel like they kind of come in as a group, and Bullock of the two was maybe expected to be the more significant contributor, and obviously he's dealing with, I think, a knee injury, unless my memory's totally off on that.
Was it his neck or his back? I think it was a cervical
maybe it's back,
disc.
sure.
A cervical disc in his neck.
Yeah,
okay, so I'm
it was pretty ugly sounding.
So suffice to say, not going to, I think, expected to miss at least the first month and a half of the season or so, maybe more. And I was just wondering, like, how you think that rotation sorts out with those two, particularly when you take into account Damian Dotson, Alonzo Trier, RJ Barrett, maybe playing some minutes as the two guards, some possible 2-point guard lineups out there. And I guess you could argue like both. I mean, particularly Bullock can certainly play the three a little, but I'm curious to see how the Knicks go about putting in a designated shooter versus someone like Alonzo Trier, who's more multifaceted, or Damian Dotson, who might even be a little bit more multifaceted, but guys who need the ball a little bit more.
Listen, man, the wing battle, the twos and the threes I'm so intrigued to see how this plays out during camp and into the preseason and so on. Fizz has the toughest job in the NBA. I said that on a most recent show that we did with Terry from the Terry and Trey show. You know, Fizz has to figure out how to balance building around the youth, whether it's making sure RJ gets his minutes, or a guy like even an ISO who had an outstanding rookie year getting his minutes, and also win now, right? I mean, if we look at it, we were one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league. We already know that. That's our one of our Achilles heels, one of many. We haven't been able to improve on that since Knicks tape. Knicks tape was really the best that we've been in terms of beyond the arc when Steve Novak was doing the discount double check, man. But when you look at Ellington, I mean, he shot 38% from three, you know, but he took the most 3-point attempts of between Ellington, ISO, and Dotson. So you could argue that he is probably the best shooter on the team. So it's going to be interesting in terms of how Fizdale kind of allocates those minutes, because you can argue that even in the starting lineup, a guy like an Ellington might give you a bit better balance than starting RJ right away.
So to stick with best case, worst case, would you say best case is that Ellington is actually getting pretty significant minutes for the team?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're going to need it, right? Unless the only thing is this: Dotson and ISO also both shot the 3-ball as well in just lesser attempts. That the thing with ISO is that he's very, very selective with his shots, and that's one of the things they're having him work on this season is they want him to take more threes.
Yeah, that to me is the most compelling thing I've read about him all offseason, that he's really working on shooting off the ball a lot and like running around screens and catching and firing. And to me, that's sort of my big question for him. Can he maintain his efficiency on a more difficult diet of threes? In some ways, though, his load maybe will even get easier because he'll get more spot up looks versus just off the dribble attempts. But I tend to agree with you. I would love Wayne Ellington playing a significant role, particularly in the starting lineup, just because you do have so many ISO guys, particularly if they're going to go with Dennis Smith Jr. at point guard. You have him, you have maybe Barrett, maybe Knox, maybe Marcus Morris at small forward. Julius Randle is going to be a guy who does a lot of his attacking off the dribble and has a lot of just pure isolation possessions. I don't mind someone who doesn't need as many shots. And just in terms of shot allocation, I'd rather have that balance between the bench and the starters. And to me, and I think you were hinting at it, or maybe you said it directly, the only question I have is, can Damian Dotson make a leap where he's a better player two-way than Ellington is this year? And I think that's probably at least a season away. But Alex, I want to hear your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by what you guys said. You know what I mean? Because I agree that, like, particularly his volume on threes is really staggering. I mean, last year he for the latter half of the season when he was with Detroit, he shot 37% on almost 8 attempts per game from three. Right. I mean, that's insane. Those are like really, really good numbers and really good volume. And that's exactly what they're trying to get out of guys like Dotson and Trier now. I guess like my best case scenario for Ellington would be, I want him to be playing spot minutes. I don't want him to be like a starter necessarily, because to me, if he's a starter, that means that Dotson, Trier, and Frank Ntilikina coming off this FIBA World Cup couldn't prove anything in training camp. Because I really think I think Fizdale is going to go in with the mentality this year of, look, we have all these vets, and I want them to push the kids, but we're still a young team. That's still what we're going for. And, that's like, what he's going to want to achieve is to still be playing all these young players. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you got a guy like Ellington starting, that means that, Dotson, Trier, and Ntilikina all couldn't prove that they could be starters on this team right out of the gate. And if Ellington holds onto that job, that's even worse. I could see maybe Ellington starting the beginning of the season to make a point, but I hope that he would get, displaced at a certain point and just kind of fade to a complementary role and a mentor role where he could really pass on all the good things that he does to these guys that fit kind of similar archetypes to him, particularly Dotson, who I think he's very similar to as a player.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. I'm okay unless you guys have any Reggie Bullock thoughts, but I mean, I think that's just sort of a wait and see situation. I'm good moving on to Bobby Portis.
Well, I'll just say about Bullock. Mm-hmm. I think they got a hell of a deal with him. Like, ultimately, like, the injury is scary, obviously, but if he comes back from that safely, I mean, he was every bit the player that Ellington was last year, maybe even a little better.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like 4 or 5 years younger. I mean, Ellington is almost 32, and I'm pretty sure that Bullock is 27. So, I mean, that's pretty significant. And they have him. I mean, the deal is like $3.5 million this year, and then an option for $3.5 million next year. So Bullock, I really want to see. I would say best case scenario is he comes in whenever he gets healthy. Around the halfway point of the season, I'm guessing, by the time he gets healthy, works the rust off in practice, gets a little bit of game time or whatever. I would hope that he comes in and he basically takes Ellington's spot, whatever Ellington was playing off the bench, those like 15 minutes of shooting threes and all that. He comes in and proves that he's the better player because the Knicks could keep him for so much cheaper going into next year, and he could legitimately be a guy that you hold on to that second-year option for. Rather than most of the guys that I see either potentially getting traded or just potentially let go at the end of the year.
Yeah, I concur there. I'm looking for spot minutes for Bullock if he comes back healthy. His best season, he shot 45% from beyond the arc, right? That was 2 years ago. So, I mean, like I said, we finished third worst in 3-point shooting percentage, fifth worst in attempts. I mean, we got to let it fly. And I think between Bullock and Ellington, they can come in and, give you a couple minutes, like you said, Al. Nothing major. Obviously, we don't want to stymie the growth of the young players, but if they can come in and provide that spark from beyond the arc, I think that's what you're looking for. And maybe one of these guys are tradable pieces by the deadline. I think that would be ideal, best case scenario.
This is a total aside, but can I drop a great Reggie Bullock story on you guys? Because I don't know when the next time we're going to talk about him is.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so like 4 years ago, he ended up on the Suns, and I was covering Suns practices at that point, and only like 2 or 3 reporters would show up to Suns practices. So, and I was like, oh, I'll write a story on him. So, like, I got him like aside, like it was the only time I've ever done this in my life. It was really cool. Like, talked to him for like 20, 30 minutes, like wrote the story. And then that night I go to the local downtown Phoenix Chipotle, which is really sort of the hub of culture in Phoenix. It's a big spot. A lot of people there. It's only about 2 blocks away from the arena where the Suns play. And I go get my food. I'm like walking outside, and my friends come up to me and they were like, "Yo, why'd you just ignore Reggie Bullock?" And I was like, What are you talking about?" And he was apparently there with his very attractive girlfriend, and he nodded at me, and I just like didn't see it out of the corner of my eye, so I just like walked right past him, and I felt awful about that since, because he seems like a great guy, and also it's the only time in my life I'll ever have an NBA player acknowledge me first, so I missed out on that opportunity. So that's my only interaction with Reggie Bullock. So I'm excited for him.
You gave him the cold shoulder, man.
I did. I hope I get to go to like Knicks Media Day or something. Like, I'm gonna have like a handwritten apology for him. So, and I hope I hope that didn't ruin things with the girl when like a random like 6'0" like white kid ignored him at Chipotle. But that's kind of a low point. All right, with that we can move on to Bobby Portis. Interesting signing, because he's a guy who just like box score watching I've always loved. I love how expressive and insane his eyes are. I don't hate that he punched Nikola Mirotic one time, and I think he's a legitimately good offensive player. I guess my big question for him is, one, can he be anything other than awful on defense? And two, what was the shooting he showed off in the second half of last year real and sustainable on a higher volume of attempts, or was it just sort of like a Noah Vonleh first month of the season thing? What do you think about all that, CP?
Interesting, man, because with Portis, I look for him to be a significant upgrade to Vonleh, in that same mold. And like you said, Vonleh, he had a strong first half last year. I'm not sure if it was injury or what, but second half he really tailed off. And so I think that's why they moved on from him. With Portis, it is interesting because the way the whole Marcus Morris thing played out late, I'm not sure if his intentions and the intentions of the Knicks met up early. I'm not sure Portis would have still been here, right? Because it seems like maybe his acquisition was just a bit too much in terms of the front court. Because you already have Randall slated at the 4. You have Morris, who's going to need some time at the 4. Soon enough, they're going to want to try Knox at the 4. So, I mean, it seems like there's already a logjam at the position. But at the end of the day, I mean, a guy that shot 40% from 3 damn near last year, averaged 14 and 8, that's a guy that can obviously contribute off the bench. So I definitely like to see if Portis can give us that next season.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I'm in total agreement with you. I think what ended up happening with the Marcus Morris, I mean, you can literally even see it right down to their contracts. Like, they literally were signed to the exact same contract almost, except for Morris only is a straight up 1-year deal instead of the 1+1 like what Portis signed. But I mean, you could see it right from that. They literally both signed 1-year, $15 million contracts. And I feel like the Knicks probably on that first night of free agency, they were like, we're going to get all of our ducks in a row. I mean, they made really, outside of the Morris move, they made all of their free agent moves in the first 2 days. I think they had a plan to get it done quick, get their guys signed. They had them figured out who they wanted to sign already. Once the Durant and Kyrie thing fell through, which I think they knew further in advance than anybody is letting on. Like, it seemed like they came out there guns blazing.
Yeah.
They knew.
And all those names had come out before the first. I feel like Ian Beck gave you all the names. He gave you Randall. He gave you Portis. He gave you Elfrid Payton.
Morris.
Ellington, Morris. So, like you said, they already knew where they were going.
They already had their ducks in a row. So I think what happened was they made a run at Morris. Morris said, no, I'm going to sign with the Spurs. They said, okay, well, we're signing Bobby Portis then. Like, no dawdling here. Like, we're not going to mess around. We're not going to let anybody else steal our guys, whatever. Sign Portis, get the ink dry. And then, Morris goes, oh, you know what? Never mind. I will come. Do you still have cap room? And they're like, okay, yeah, I guess we do. Right. we can make this work. Because then everything happened with the Bullock deal too. Right. So then they're like, well, we got some space now, so sure, why not? So I think that's just kind of how things went down. That said, though, yeah, I'm with you. I don't know necessarily that I think Portis is going to fall into the same sort of trap that Vonleh did, because I will say, like, Portis got better as the year went on last year. Granted, he switched teams at a certain point, but he was shooting 38% in the first half of the year with the Bulls for whatever playing time he did get. He only played in 22 games. And then once he got traded to Washington, he played in 28 games and he shot 40% from 3. And it was on over 4 attempts per game, almost 4.5, which is really good volume for a power forward.
Right.
I worry a little bit that he's got too quick of a trigger, with that being said. But, I think he's shown that he can have some consistency in his 3-point shot. Now, I just looked this up because I was curious, because I think he's going to play a lot of backup 5. I don't necessarily think he's got the chops to play backup 5. And, I already mentioned there's no other real rim protector on this team other than Mitchell Robinson.
That's my concern, man. That's why I go with Taj for right now, but I hear you.
But that said, he did, once he went to Washington last year, in those last 28 games, the Wizards were 4.2 points better in net rating with him out there than without him out there. So, because they went from being with him out there, they were a plus 0.5, and without him out there, they were a minus 3.7. So it's a 4.2 point swing that he influenced there. So I don't know. I'd be lying if I said I watched enough tape to say that he's for sure going to be a decent enough two-way guy, but I'm hoping that maybe he can at least hold his own well enough at the 5 spot, which requires more just being bulky and rebounding than it does, being laterally quick. Like if he was playing at the nominal 4, maybe it could actually help him a little bit and could make him a pretty valuable piece for the Knicks as that backup 5.
Yeah, I guess my only concern with that is that he was just such a. I mean, I think Tom talked about it last. He was such a disaster as a rim protector. Like that would be it. But I don't know. I've gotten to the point where like you almost have to like wipe defense off the board just because the Knicks, like, unless they're really committed to playing Frank and Mitch like big minutes together. Yeah. Like I can't imagine a scenario where they're even decent defensively. I guess my big thing with him is like, can he get to a point where like he improves defensively enough, or you just don't care about that enough? Like can you play like him and Julius Randle together, or all of it, and it's going to be separate because of like overlapping skill sets and how bad they both are in defense?
Yeah, I mean, I to your guys' points, I think you're asking a lot from a lot of guys to overachieve on the defensive end. But ideally, if Portis can continue the production that he gave you last year, especially with the Wizards, add a little bit of defensive acumen to the other side, I think that would be ideal. Worst case scenario, you don't know. I mean, he could come up with the Canner syndrome or the Noah syndrome. Will he be happy with not getting minutes? Who's the guy that's going to sulk that he's not getting minutes? I don't think it's going to be kumbaya for all these guys. Hopefully these guys buy in the beginning, but I think that's my worst case scenario with Portis is that he becomes disenfranchised or disenchanted with the minutes and starts leaking stuff out and eventually they move on from him.
Yeah, no, that's a very real worry, honestly. Out of all the guys they brought in this offseason, like Randle, you for sure don't have to worry about because they paid him and he's talented enough that he's, a cornerstone now of what the Knicks have going on right now. So he's not going to have to ever worry about minutes or anything like that. He's never going to be frustrated like that. And then everybody else, though, I mean, out of all the other guys, I think Portis is the most volatile.
Right.
He's the guy that's got the rep for being kind of hot-headed. He punched a dude in practice, on his own team. You know what I mean? Like he's shown to have a little bit of a hot temper to go with those crazy eyes. So I definitely worry about that too, for sure.
Just make sure he doesn't put his hands on Mitch, man. That's my guy.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. I mean, I can't think of it. Honestly, I will say this much about the Knicks. I find all of and I'm probably just rose-colored glasses because we're Knicks fans, but I look at these guys and I'm like, man, I actually really like all the personalities on the team this year. Like there's not a single guy that I'm like, shit, I wish he wasn't on the Knicks. Like going into last year was like, Cantor, I wish he wasn't on the Knicks. Yeah, I don't like him. Like, Courtney Lee, like he's a cool dude, but he just doesn't fit here. I wish he wasn't on the team as a distraction. You know what I mean? Like, Tim Hardaway, I don't know if he can ever really be the guy that we need him to be. Like, I feel like he's getting paid too much. I don't like him either. You know what I mean? Like, There's nobody like that this year. I kind of just am going in like, I want to be pleasantly surprised by everybody.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this exercise was designed for Bobby Portis because I've been sort of racking my brain. We haven't talked about his upside this whole segment, and I think there's like a reason for that. Like, what represents success for Bobby Portis next year? Like, is it sort of like the big man version of Alonzo Trier where he just comes in for like 15 minutes, scores 10 points, grabs 5 rebounds, and you're like, all right, good job, Bobby. You kept it even. Like, I think because his skill set and like in so many ways, he's just sort of a poor man's Randle. I don't know where there's really room for him to succeed in a big way. And I guess and in some ways, I think the best case scenario for him is almost getting like an early 2nd round pick for him if another team like likes him and wants to take a shot on him.
I would say my super simple best case, worst case for him. Best case, he proves to be a serviceable backup 5 behind Mitchell Robinson, or the closest thing that they have on the roster to a serviceable backup 5. Because really, like, someone's gonna have to move down a position. It's either gonna have to be probably him or Taj, and then Julius in spot minutes. But he's the most likely candidate. So best case is he proves that he could do that. He could play 20 minutes a game backup center behind Mitch, get some buckets, get some rebounds, not be such a sieve on defense that it completely sinks the team. And then worst case scenario would be, to me, just he can't do that. And then he's sponging up those minutes at 4, and then maybe he gets benched, like CP was saying, and then, tempers flare because he's tired of playing behind Marcus Morris, who's also kind of a heated personality. Things like that. I wouldn't want to see stuff like that happening. I don't want to. Biggest thing I don't want to see this year is a fractured locker room, because I despise that crap. Like, I despise all the locker room drama, and it feels like it always follows the Knicks, whether it's Cantor or there's. I'm trying to think Courtney Lee even did it once, for as much of a professional he was. In general, he did it before, complaining about playing time and this, that, the other. Tired of that crap, man. Like, I just want everybody to finally buy in and be okay with what they're assigned.
Elfrid Payton, sort of like a last-minute signing, kind of an interesting one. I mean, I'm the person who always complains that the Knicks built around too many shoot-first guys, and Payton is kind of the ultimate antithesis of that. My worry with him is that, like, the other component I would look for there is a really good shooter, and he is not that guy. CP, I guess, especially after Frank's performance in FIBA, how do you think the point guard position sorts itself out? And I guess, like, Peyton's floor and ceiling, like, fit into that conversation.
It's another dogfight, another critical position battle that I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. I thought Peyton, like Portis, was another move in terms of excess. I wasn't necessarily a fan of the pickup, because I just feel like we need to, and I'm not gonna make this a Frank Ntilikina telethon, but I just feel like we need to know where we stand with this kid, right? First and foremost, before anything else. And they continue to pile on point guard after point guard. Whether it was Moutier, Jared Jack, who came in, who's supposed to be the veteran leader. He ends up getting more minutes than Frank. It's Moutier. It's Trey Burke, who storms all the way up from Westchester, right? It's Dennis Smith Jr. And now you have Peyton. So, I didn't like the move. Again, I think it further, puts Frank on the back burner. But, the competition could be good for Frank. From a Peyton standpoint, obviously, you like the fact that he can run an offense. You know that. I think he's been proven to do that from a supporting cast role. We know that that's a guy that Perry has coveted from last season before they got in on Moutier. He did want Peyton. They have the relationship from Orlando. I think best case scenario, and Alex, you and I were talking about it earlier. I think best case scenario is him to be the backup point guard to DSJ. I think if this team wants to have anything of a remotely successful season, not saying playoffs or anything, but just a season that you can hang your hat on, I think DSJ has to be the one that takes that leap and helps to be a leader on this team along with Randall. And I think if Peyton beats him out in camp, I don't necessarily see that as a good sign, especially from the point guard position.
Yeah. You alluded. We were talking about this on Twitter earlier. Like, actually, the worst case scenario for me for Elfrid Payton is that he wins the starting job, because that's one position where I feel like, with DSJ, a lot of people believe that DSJ is a guy that can potentially make a leap this year if he can, fix up his jumper and, get fully integrated with this team finally, like, get comfortable and everything. He showed some real flashes after he got here last year. So you would hope that with a camp and a whole summer to work on stuff and all that he would be ready to rock and ready to take that starting job. So I think my best case with Peyton is that he would prove that he could play backup point guard well enough, like, to the point where some team that's desperate for, like, either a really good backup or even a starter, that has someone go down with injury or something, trades for him and says, like, this is a guy that can start for us. He can play defense. He can, score a little bit. Mostly he can pass. That's exactly what we need right now. Let's say it's I don't know. I'm trying to think like the Jazz or something like that. You know what I mean? Let's say, God forbid, Conley goes down and Emmanuel Moutier's not cutting it out there. Maybe they call up the Knicks and say, hey, we want Elfrid Payton. And then, maybe, like, because Utah is going to be a playoff team, the Knicks could snake a late first-round pick or something for Payton in that scenario, especially because he has that second-year option. So that would be my ideal for Payton. It's nothing against the guy. I feel a lot better about the incumbent options that were here before than I do about the prospect of him coming in and sort of taking the reins of everything.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. I mean, like the super best case is that he figures out how to shoot, because I mean, if he was like a plus shooter, he would be
shooting is abysmal.
Yeah, no, it's awful. That's the thing. He would be like a top 12 point guard in the NBA. The issue with that is, like, along with Ricky Rubio, like he's like one of the worst shooters at the position ever in like the modern era of basketball, and that's a big issue when you want to be an NBA player. So I think just any scenario, obviously I don't want him to get hurt, but that like clears room for Frank and DSJ and like allows the Knicks. I mean, the whole thing with those two guys is like I just want to get a gauge for what they are. And with Frank, like whether it's been because of like nagging injuries last year or him just not being good enough offensively to like sustain him on the floor, or the Knicks not giving him a fair chance, we've never gotten to see what he is. And like I harp on that point and I make it again and again and again on this podcast. But signing Peyton, I mean, to me was just indicative of like the Knicks don't think of Frank Ntilikina as a real part of their future, and they're like not necessarily inclined to give him that chance, or at least they're going to make it as hard on him as possible. And I'm hoping FIBA sort of made them rethink that and give him a fair shot to beat out Peyton. So to me, just any scenario that involves Elfrid Payton not playing over those two guys, I'm kind of okay with.
I got killed for it on Twitter. Knicks Twitter killed me for it when Fran Fraschilla, I think, was the one that was talking about Frank's FIBA play and was saying that he will probably have a better career after the Knicks. And I agreed. I said I think maybe the timing and the fit is not right for Frank here. And everybody killed me. Like, how could you say that? How can you say the fit? He can fit with anyone. And I said, it's not about how Frank fits with the current roster. It's like, how much more do you need to see between the acquisitions that they've made and his ineffectiveness over the last 2 years to be optimistic about his future?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm just hoping. I've said, and maybe you can comment on this. I've had this belief that I think that things are a little overblown with the Knicks supposedly hating Frank. Mm-hmm. I think that Fizdale actually. So. This is the first thing. I think, and I've said this on our show before. I maybe even said it on your show once or twice. I think that Frank confuses Fizdale.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think Fizdale knows what to make of him. He's like, you've got skills, you can play defense, but you're not like my favorite type of player. Yeah. Like Fizdale loves these like attacking, slashing guards that, just want to get into the paint and score and shoot and, dribble and, break down guys in ISO and stuff. And that's just not Frank's game. And it never will be. And so, but I do think that, Fizdale's going to give Frank, just like I think everybody else, honestly, I think they're going to run in with open camp this year again, just like they did last year. And they're going to say every spot's up for grabs and Frank will get a shot. And like everybody forgets, but Frank won a starting job out of camp last year. And Fizdale gave that to him and was like, he earned it, man. Like he shot well in preseason and, we're going to start him as small forward, which was, maybe not ideal, but it was something. And then he started at point guard for a little bit of the season. And then, every time after that, after those DMPs, he had a couple stints where he started to play well and then got hurt and then started to play well and then got hurt. And that was just kind of the whole thing. So like, I think it's a little overblown. I also don't know how much truth there was to the reports that the Knicks would have been willing to deal him for like a second round pick. I feel like that was probably put out there by other general managers or something, because that just doesn't seem right to me based off how they talk about him and how they, outwardly project about him. I think they actually like him quite a bit more than that, but I guess we'll see. I don't know. It's turned into a whole separate discussion.
Yeah.
And beating the drum about Frank here. But I don't know. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Like, do you think that they actually dislike him as much as is reported?
I don't know if it's dislike. I just think it's confidence. Like you said, with Fizdale, he definitely did not know how to use him last year. And I feel like he did go on record as saying that he didn't even know what position that he could use him best at last year. And again, They prioritized Moutier over him last year. Trey Burke, Jarrett Jack. They bring in DSJ, and now they bring in Elfrid Payton, who, like I said, as we know, is Perry's guy from Orlando and somebody that they wanted, and from what we've heard, prior to them getting Moutier. So I just feel like Gavin had said, I felt like They should have went into this thing with a DSJ, Frank, can't battle, and so that we can see exactly what we have in these guys. We got Frank in the same draft as DSJ. We got DSJ in the Kristaps Porzingis trade. I think it behooves us to get the most out of these guys and to give them the biggest opportunity to fail.
And I mean, to that point, like I'd be perfectly happy with Kadeem Allen as the third point guard. They didn't desperately need to bring in a fourth dude. They had someone who proved himself at least to be, I mean, I would argue, I mean, maybe some other teams don't feel this way, an NBA player. So it's not like they were just desperate at that spot. So it didn't make any sense to me. But I guess they had the money, so we'll see how it goes. Marcus Morris, someone who Alex mentioned signed under sort of strange circumstances. Probably the first guy to pick the Knicks over the Spurs in quite some time. Obviously, a little bit more money on the table. And I mean, I said it when they signed him. I think you can make an argument he's the best player on the Knicks from day one. I mean, I'd certainly make a case for Mitchell Robinson, maybe even Julius Randle and Alonzo Trier. I know some people would argue over him, but I think as far as two-way impact, like there is, let's put it like this. There isn't a guy on this team who's better at offense and defense than Marcus Morris. And I think that makes him valuable. And I think that means he has a very distinct and clear role on this team. I've seen some people mention that Knox could start ahead of him. I'd be shocked if at the beginning of the season, Knox is starting ahead of him. But CP, how do you think he fits into this mix? And do you think he bumps off some of the other sign the Knicks had? Do you think he limits the minutes of guys like Knox and RJ right off the bat? And I guess just sort of what's his role on this Knicks team?
I agree with you 100%. I love this move when they got him. I couldn't believe that he would ditch the Spurs for the Knicks. I still can't believe it. No matter the contract, but I'm glad we have him. Best two-way player on the team, no doubt about it. I think he gives us a much-needed veteran presence, another high IQ vet that we can slide in there and help these young guys. He can spread the floor. He's multidimensional. Obviously, he can play a little three, maybe the four, maybe his best position. And in a pinch or depending on lineups, maybe you go with him at small ball five. I love the pickup. In terms of him and Knox, I think if we're gonna look at it as an asset, right, and we're still in the asset acquisition phase, I would say maybe put him in the lineup if he doesn't kill you at the three defensively. I would say throw him in the lineup with the hopes of trading him by the deadline, because I think he's the only asset of the guys that we picked up that could yield you the highest return.
So would you say that's probably your best case scenario?
Best case scenario. Yep.
Yeah. I think so as well. I think that's probably my best case for him, which kind of sucks because I want to like him more and want him to be here for a long time. But I think he will have more than served his purpose if he comes in here. He provide because really, if we're talking about realistic potential outcomes for Kevin Knox, as far as the ceiling goes, Marcus Morris could be it.
Right.
I mean, Morris came in as kind of a chucker. It's easy to forget, but he came in as a guy that wasn't super well regarded defensively. His brother was better regarded defensively, Marquise.
That's right.
And Marcus has actually, ironically, become, I would say, the better defender and better overall player of the two, despite early in his career looking like he was never really going to be that. So I would say that I would want him to be a good mentor to Kevin Knox and play some good minutes. The only time I would be like, let's not trade him, is if the Knicks are legitimately trending towards the playoffs and it doesn't look like total fool's gold. And keeping him would be beneficial, like if he's like a huge rotation player. But other than that, if predictably, if the Knicks look like they're going to miss the playoffs, ship him out. I mean, it sucks, but send him off somewhere. A guy like him always has value to a contender. And even though they wouldn't get a ton of, and actually what kind of works in a contender's favor if they pick him up, even if they're capped out,
right,
is that because of non-bird rights, which is just when you sign a guy to a 1-year contract, you can pay him up to, I think it's 125% of his previous salary. But since the Knicks overpaid him, that could actually work for a contender, because then they could say, oh, well, we'll just sign him to a 3-year deal at $12 million a season, which is probably his actual market value. And, then he could potentially be with a contender for years to come. Maybe even the Spurs, who knows? That would be a sick move if the Knicks could somehow trade Morris to the Spurs.
Back to the Spurs.
Eventually, somewhere down the line. Get him to where he was always destined to be.
I just imagine Greg Popovich like cursing under his breath and just being like, "All right, fine, just do it, just do it."
Yeah, but so that's my best case. That's my best case. Worst case is that he falls out of the rotation, just expires at the end of the year, didn't even contribute to anything, and that's it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I could see him just like on the court, like being sort of the glue of this Knicks team. Like maybe this is a little bit generous to him, but like he's kind of the one guy outside of I guess I would put Mitch in this category, but that's like an above average NBA player on both sides of the floor. And with all the weaknesses you're going to have, like mostly on defense and like with a couple guys on offense, I just think you need that. And if the Knicks want to be anything close to competent, I think they need him playing like 32, 33 minutes a night. And I think he'll be like when the Knicks are somewhat competitive, if they are somewhat competitive, I think he'll be a big part of it. So to me, like his ceiling is almost in terms of contributing to winning is almost higher than Julius Randle, unless Randle somehow got a lot better defensively this offseason. I genuinely believe he could be like either the MVP or the second MVP of this year's Knicks team. And look, if Marcus Morris is going to be that guy, your team isn't in a great position to begin with. But I do believe the upside is pretty high with him. And unless there's like off the court stuff, which he's had in his career and like locker room stuff, like it seems like he's more mature. I just don't see the downside being that great because I just can't imagine a world where the Knicks couldn't immediately trade him for a second round pick if anything went south.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you on that. And let's go for some wins. I mean, I definitely want to make sure that the young guys get their opportunity. But I also think that let's try to listen, we won 17 games last year, man. I want to get off to this season on a high note and have this team shooting for the stars, whatever it may be. If it's an 8 seed, if it's 9 seed, whatever it may be, I want to go for some wins. And so I think putting him in that lineup, in the starting lineup, gives you a bit more balance, especially if, depending on who you're going to put out there on the perimeter, you may not be strong defensively there. I think padding Randle between Morris and Mitch also kind of solidifies the front court from a defensive standpoint. And like I said, just brings you that balance. And as you said, Gavin, from a worst case scenario, yes, he's had a bit of a pass in terms of his emotions. Remember him and Hornacek got into it a couple of years ago in Phoenix. You know, does it go like the Portis route if he falls out the rotation, becomes a malcontent? He certainly matured over the years, but that would certainly be my worst case scenario.
All right, Julius Randle. Let's get into it. I'm not even going to tee you up with a question, CP. I think he's sort of spoken for. What do you think about him?
Best case scenario is an all-star bid, man. I think that would be the best case scenario for Julius Randle. He's gotten better every season since he's come in. If you think about his rookie year, it's really a redshirt year. He got injured in the first season. And I think this is a guy we may have finally gotten a guy who's still ascending from a free agency standpoint. He's only 24 years old. Like I said, what did he average? About 21 and 9 last year. Shot the best that he's ever shot from three ball, I think close to 40%. So for me, Randall, best case scenario, he's an all-star, man.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. Honestly, I want to see him. Like if we're doing this like Mamba Challenge style, like I want to see him be like a 23 and 10 player this year, something like that. Maybe even more than that. You know, I want to see him average 10 boards a game now, for the second time in his career. He did do that his second year in the league. Well, technically his first year in the league because he only played 14 minutes that first year.
Right.
Before like breaking his leg. But I want to see him do that again. I would really like to see him again at least plateau his 3-point shooting.
Yeah.
But I also want to see him try to average a career high in assists this year. You know, if he could do all those things and make an all-star bid, that's best case scenario for me. Worst case scenario is he regresses. That would be the worst possible thing. If he regresses, if the burden is too much for him, you know, kind of being, because they're going to lean on him. They're going to lean on him a lot as their number one scoring option, their number one option on offense, period, you know, like, and they're going to want him to facilitate some and do all kinds of things. You know, he's going to be like honestly like a very, very supersized version of remember when they were kind of letting Vonleh bring the ball up the court last year,
Yeah.
and initiate and do stuff like that. I get the feeling they're going to do that with Randall, but they're going to want to do that way, way better, and obviously score way, way better, and do basically everything better than Noah Vonleh did last year, who's a bench player. But that's kind of what I'm thinking for him. And that would be my that's my main fear as far as a worst case scenario.
Yeah, I would say, and real quick, Gavin, I would say, well, one correction, he shot 34% from three. I said 40, he shot 34%, but still a vast improvement to previous years when he was only in the 20s. So you can definitely see a more concerted effort from him to kind of spread the floor a little bit. You see him working out with Melo. He's working on his footwork as well. So Randall's definitely putting in work in the off season. I would say, to your point on the downside, with those numbers that he's putting up, will they contribute to wins? Are those going to be winning statistics, or is it going to be more of a stat pad? You know what I mean? And to your point, Alex, definitely want to see him either maintain or exceed those assist numbers, getting the other guys involved, and obviously on the defensive end being, more than average on the defensive end and helping out in rim protection with Mitch. I think if he can put all that together, he could definitely crack the All-Star lineup.
Yeah, to me, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. That's the way he does that is I guess to combine both of your answers is by becoming a better defender, passer, and shooter. I mean, that's the only way this is doable. That's the only way it's sustainable. That's the only way it makes sense to have a team where Julius Randle is your best player. Because last season, I mean, there's some noise in all these numbers, but when you look at how the Pelicans did when he was on the floor with Jrue Holiday and Anthony Davis, and when he was off the floor and Jrue Holiday and Anthony Davis were on the floor without him, they were a lot better without him. And the reason for that was because he was one of the worst defenders in the league, and that's sort of been the story with him his entire career, and why people would be like, okay, like, I mean, he's like fun, like clearly he can score, but does it mean anything? I mean, the answer's been a pretty resounding no for the first 4 or 5 years of his career. And then the other thing with me is, can he become someone who's actually respected as a three-point shooter? Because last year he shot 34% on a large diet of wide open attempts, and that doesn't really do much for you. When like even someone like Rajon Rondo, who had like a season like a year or two ago where he shot like 38%, and they're all wide open. It matters when you can draw your defender out, when he can generate room for someone like Mitchell Robinson rolling to the basket. So, and to do that, he's going to have to replicate and exceed. It's going to have to be like 37%, somewhere around that mark. And then when guys are guarding him, if he can still hit 34%, that'll be pretty significant. And I think it makes this whole thing sustainable. So to me, he has to make some really decisive improvements, and those separate him from being a negative to being someone who's like genuinely deserving of an all-star berth because of how good he is as a scorer. Yeah,
no doubt. All right. I don't think I have anything else to add on Julius Randle, unless you guys do, because that seems like a pretty good point to wrap up the show at, right?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah,
that was great, man. Definitely.
All right, so
you guys have coming up. Yeah,
CP, thank you so much for coming on, man. Giving us so much time. This went a little longer than I figured it probably would, but I'm very appreciative that you came on. Why don't you tell everybody again a little bit about KnicksFanTV, what you got going on, about everything for this upcoming season, where to find you on social media, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, man, and thanks again for having me, fellas. Alex, you and I have gone back a lot this year. We definitely worked together, and you were the co-host of the Sunday night post-game show, man. That was a great time, man. So hopefully you can come back on, and Gavin can come back on, and it's youtube.com/KnicksFanTV. It's the home of the diehard Knicks fan, where we talk about Knicks news, Knicks rumors, and post-game live analysis featuring live callers from the fans. It's been going very well over the last year and a half or so. The support's been tremendous. And it's just a platform for the fans to have their say, for the fans to weigh in and have their opinion on the team. It's been an emotional off season, but it's been a wild ride. And I think the engagement has been fairly the same. I was curious to see how things would change if we didn't get KD or we didn't get Zion, but things have been ratcheting up, and I think the fan base is encouraged by the pieces that we have. it's taken us 20 years to finally start to rebuild this thing properly, and I think there is enthusiasm and interest in seeing how this team kind of rallies around the young guys. And so, again, the platform has been doing well as a result, and we hope to see more people on the post-game shows. We'll be getting started again in a week or so with the post-game live stream, so we hope all the fans will come out and participate.
Well, so as a testimonial from someone who's been on there and also just watched along, first off, you got to wait for your Locked On Knicks usually till the next morning. You got to wait for your posting and toasting recap till the next morning or late at night, whatever. What's dope about your show is that it's immediate. So yeah, if anybody's listening to us here and like you want, a fix on game nights, check out KnicksFanTV, call in, text in, whatever you want to do. You're good about always giving everybody shout outs and stuff as well. So, and I will definitely try to come on at least a number of times this year, although my Locked On Knicks commitments usually make that a little more difficult these days, but I'm definitely going to come on to Knicks Fan TV as well. CP, again, thank you so much for coming on and for taking the time to speak with us, and hopefully we'll have you on here again sometime throughout the season as well.
Fellas, thanks again. Let's go Knicks, baby.
Let's go.